What are the 5 toughest decisions you'll have to make in Elden Ring? The Lands Between can be confusing and often downright ambiguous when it comes to its own lore, which means that when faced with certain choices, it can be tough to figure out exactly what you're deciding between. So in this video, we're looking specifically at decisions where the best choice isn't cut and dry, where the morality is hazy, and the choice with the best material rewards will depend on your playthrough and build. Hence, we'll be looking into every far-reaching consequence and lore implication of these tough choices so you can decide which is best for you. But first, if you're looking for something to scratch the itch of dark fantasy combat-focused RPG, then let me take a moment to tell you about today's very fitting video sponsor, Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree. Basically a Souls-like Metroidvania-style hybrid, in this game you'll explore a beautifully hand-painted world full of various monsters. As you hone your combat skills across a choice of 6 different starting classes, each with their own sprawling talent tree for a wide array of unique builds with their own unique abilities, ranging from the tanky Vanguard class to the purely magical Spellbinder. You'll then have to dodge, parry, and fight your way through wolves, spiders, undead, and many more foes, with plenty of boss fights, fantastic voice acting, and a brilliantly atmospheric score. And of course, there's also plenty of weapons, armor, items, and spells to find. Things you'll absolutely need to hunt far and wide for, and choose which to equip carefully, as this game's combat is far from easy. And with a non-linear world to explore, as well as a branching main storyline with multiple endings, there's plenty to enjoy. So check it out via my link down below. Thank you again to Mandragora for sponsoring this video, and now let's head back to the Lands Between. Melina is a character who it's safe to say that the Tarnished couldn't have completed this journey without. Hell, if it weren't for Melina bestowing us with Torrent and the Strength of Runes, there's probably like 5 people on this planet who could have still beaten the game, 10 at most. And she does this all in return simply for her spirit to catch a ride to the base of the Erd Tree. And how is Melina able to fulfill this role to grant us all of these boons and strengths? Well, it's unconfirmed just who exactly Melina is, but the game does leave plenty of clues. For instance, she slots right into the same naming convention as followed by the other children of Marika and Radagon. Melania, Mikola, and Messmer since the DLC all sound very similar, as does Melina. She also has her own unique variant of Butterfly, the same as these other 3 characters, and then there's the fact that many times throughout the game, Melina can detect and relay the words once spoken by Queen Marika, and when reaching the Altar's Plateau, she'll share some more details that are very interesting indeed.
I was born at the foot of the Erd Tree, where Mother gave me my purpose, though now everything is lost to me. I have to ascertain for myself the reason for which I live, burned and bodiless.
So it seems the whole reason that Melina needs to return to the foot of the Erd Tree is she doesn't know exactly what her purpose is in this world anymore. And upon reaching the capital of Leyndell, Melina's spirit will depart for a time, presumably to converse with her mother, who again is almost certainly Marika herself, and to ascertain what her true purpose is. And when she returns, having helped to defeat Morgott at the base of the Erd Tree, her task is finally clear.
You were unable to enter the Erd Tree, no? Prevented by the mantle of barbs. The thorns are impenetrable, a husk of the Erd Tree's being that spurns all that exists without. The only way to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord is to pass the thorns. My purpose serves to aid in that very act. So I'd like you to undertake a new journey with me to the Flame of Ruin, far above the clouds, upon the snowy mountaintops of the giants. Then I can set the Erd Tree aflame and guide you down the path to becoming Elden Lord.
Melina, something of a demigod herself, presumably by all accounts, exists to serve as the Erdtree's kindling, the only way for any Tarnished to breach the Erdtree's defenses and free Marika from her imprisonment by the Greater Will. And this is further backed up specifically by Melina's own blade. Found in a secret room just before the bottom of the Lift of Rold is the Blade of Calling, a dagger given to one who set out on a journey to fulfill her duty long ago. The power of its former owner, the Kindling Maiden, is still apparent. The one who walks alongside the flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. And that last sentence, I think, refers to us, the Tarnished, walking alongside the flame that is Melina, and by letting her burn the Erdtree, we are transported directly to Farum Azula, where we meet Malekith, who holds the rune of destined death. But here's the crux, because Melina's purpose is essentially just to die. A sacrificial child of Queen Marika, if you will, whose life needs to end in order for any hope of a better world. Though it's understandable if we didn't feel like sacrificing one of our most important and dependable friends for the greater good. Fortunately, on the way to the Forge of the Giants, where we can commit this cardinal sin, an alternative option is presented, though it does come from one of the most evil men ever to have lived, Shabriri, who happens to be inhabiting the body of another of our former friends, Yura.
You are about to sacrifice something precious, the life of a fair maiden, that you would toss into the fiery forge, only so that you may be lord. What a horrible thing to ponder. Your ascendancy requires her sacrifice, whether she wishes it or not. But how would the Lord, crowned so, be looked upon?
He then directs us back to Leyndell, far beneath its depths, to seek an audience with the Three Fingers and inherit the Frenzied Flame, along with the ability to burn the Erdtree ourselves, without the need for us, or Melina, to, die. A tempting proposition, indeed, when pitched like this, but one heavily despised and warned against by Melina herself. Because, of course, as we'll later discover, as Melina herself continues to warn against as we press ever closer, the Frenzied Flame is chaos, devouring life and thought unending. In doing this, we will not become one to save this world, but rather will be its destroyer. But, fortunately, we don't actually have to worry about that, as a method already exists to quell the Frenzied Flame after inheriting it. By completing Millicent's questline, siding with her at the end, and then defeating Melania, we'll obtain Miquella's Needle, which we can eventually use in the Storm Beyond Time, where Placidusax resides, to quell the influence of the Chaos God now within us, and we can effectively undo all of the problems relating to the Flame of Frenzy. No longer must the world become consumed by unending madness, but rather we can once again choose one of the other endings, which Melina no doubt originally envisioned when choosing to sacrifice herself. And we can have done so in this timeline whilst circumventing the need for Melina to die. The tough question here is whether that's actually the best thing for her. See, if we let Melina burn the Erdtree herself, somber as that moment is, our final exchange is strangely fulfilling. She's completed her ultimate purpose with every confidence that we will go on to defeat Malekith and ascend the throne to Elden Lords. So she's happy, or as happy as one can be when faced with eternal oblivion. Whereas, if we inherit the Frenzied Flame, even if done from a player perspective specifically to save her, Melina will be nothing but mad.
Should you rise as the Lord of Chaos, I will kill you. As sure as night follows day, such is my duty. For allowing you the strength of runes. Goodbye, my companion. Goodbye, Torrent.
And that's it. A warning and a threat. That's the last thing we hear from Melina, and understandably so in this case. In fact, it's only if we do pursue the Chaos ending that we see her again in this case in a final cutscene, ready to find and deliver unto us destined death. But if we go through with the original plan, simply to save Melina's life and then quell the Frenzied Flame, there's no telling what exactly she goes on to do. And she's presumably left kicking about, a purposeless, forgotten spirits left to wander the lands between. Perhaps there is hope, the idea that post-game she could reunite with the Tarnished once they become Elden Lords, but there's every chance that she simply slowly fades into nothing, denied her one chance to fulfill her ultimate destiny. And I kind of doubt that Melina is the type who desires to settle down for a quiet life. So the question is whether it's better to leave the door open for that, or let her die, as she requests, in a literal blaze of glory. Raya's questline is one of a very small handful that can actually have happy endings, depending on what you do. And by happy, I mean she's potentially still alive, and not hating every moment of her existence by the end. But to fully understand the best, worst, and in-between outcomes for Raya's questline, we first need to jump back to the beginning. When we meet Raya, she's based out in Liurnia, and will first request that we retrieve her necklace from a fellow Tarnished named Blackguard Bigboggart. It's best to do this by paying him, as it keeps the door open for his short questline as well, which we'll actually touch on in a later chapter, but impressed with our willingness to stand up to our fellow Tarnished, Raya will suggest that we join up with the Volcano Manor. In fact, doing this favour for her, we can even unlock a shortcut there after finding her once again when reaching the Altar's Plateau. Now, I did question whether to join Volcano Manor itself could be considered a tough decision, and yes, whilst hunting down our fellow Tarnished and looting all of their cool gear definitely poses some moral questions for the player character, from a gameplay and pure content perspective, you're losing a lot by not joining the manor. And in fact, I'd argue that killing Rykard early and locking yourself out of these quests and rewards is one of the worst decisions you can make in this game. Check out my worst decisions video on Elden Ring for more of those. But back to Raya, and once joining Volcano Manor properly, we'll begin to learn the truth about this well-meaning and slightly hunched child of the manor.
Have you ever heard any strange sounds here at the manor? Something beyond the walls? Like breathing or slithering scales? Oh, fie, what am I saying? It just isn't possible. I must be tired.
Raya's sensitivity to the other serpent creatures of the manor makes sense, of course, as when we visit her next, it turns out that she too is of serpent form.
Goodness, am I still a serpent? Oh, how dreadful. How dreadful indeed. Oh, forgive my distress. I ought to be thanking you for treating me as usual. Despite this appearance, brave Tarnished, this is my true form. My real name is Zarias. Please forgive the deception. Do understand. This duplicity is my own doing. Lady Tanith speaks no falsehoods. And the Volcano Manor is just as it seems. Lady Tanith is my mother. I am told I was born by the grace of a glorious king. That my mother cherishes this form I inhabit. I am proud of what I am.
Here, despite Raya's unusual form, it's clear that she's still a perfectly innocent child, believing herself to be the special daughter of Lady Tanith, and merely shunned in her true form due to the cruelty of the outside world. Furthermore, she's been out there willingly recruiting any Tarnished who display the propensity to become kinslayers, all the while believing Volcano Manor to be exactly as it appears on the surface. But after we find the secret passageway to the prison town, it becomes clearer just what this place actually is. A bastion of torture and sacrifice, all twisted into the service of the great serpent Eagle, who, it is said, that long ago was the elder serpent that dwelt on Mount Gelmir and devoured the demigod Praetor Rykard. This we can learn from finding the man-serpent ashes, which also tells us that the birth of the man-serpents followed on from this event. Learning these dark truths and returning to Raya, she will have begun to suspect a few disturbing things of her own, and will straight up ask us if this place holds some dark secrets that's been kept from her, prompting the option to tell Raya the dark side of Volcano Manor.
Oh, so there was a secret after all. Oh my. Lady Tanith, my own mother, has deceived me. Was I not born by the grace of a king?
If we question Tanith on this fact, she'll explain that some things are better left unknown, and that one's heritage shouldn't matter when united in a task as great as rising up against the Erd Tree. But this doesn't stop us from uncovering more truths ourselves. After defeating the Godskin Noble in the Temple of Igle, laying at the altar behind, we can pick up the Serpent's Amnion, the membrane that would enclose the embryo of an unborn fetus. And this one is described to have cradled the poor, unwanted offspring of a repellent birthing ritual. It will never dry out, remaining damp indefinitely, and if given to Raya, she will easily recognize the thing.
What is this? I remember this scent distinctly. Funny, isn't it? I am certain of it. I was born inside this. It's a part of my birth, Mother. You have my gratitude. Thanks to you, I am no longer afraid. I want to know how I was born and met Lady Tanith. One day, I hope to call her Mother once again. This time from the bottom of my heart.
And so, realizing that she is in fact adopted, Raya ventures down the same path that we've travelled in search of further answers of her own. And speaking to Tanith once again after this, she will provide us with the tool, serving as one way to resolve this quest.
If she discovers the answer to her question, and it causes distress, have her drink this potion, to purge that which would cause her pain. Yes, I know. My wish is a grave disrespect to her. No different than the Erd Tree's imposition. But I've no choice. It must be done.
The tonic of forgetfulness will do exactly what you'd expect, undoing all of Raya's character developments and allowing her to continue blissfully ignorant to the true nature of her birth. And given Raya's distress when we next meet her, it really isn't a bad option. You see, Raya actually will discover the truths of her birth. In a small room above the Temple of Igle, Raya will have found the talisman Dedeka's Woe, a disturbing likeness of a woman whose skin was flayed. It is said that this woman, named Dedeka, indulged in every form of adultery and wicked pleasure imaginable, giving birth to a myriad of grotesque children. Indeed, it appears almost entirely certain that Raya's true mother was this woman named Dedeka, and through some grotesque birthing ritual between her and presumably the elder serpent Igle/Rykard, the many man-serpents that populate the manor were birthed into existence. And just why Tanith decided to take in Zorias, or Raya, as her own specifically, is not fully clear. Perhaps she simply desired an offspring of her own, and Raya proved to be the gentlest among the broods. Either way, Tanith's request to have Raya forget all of this does seem to come from a place of love, not wanting her adopted daughter to suffer in knowing the truth, and it's clear to see just how much suffering this does cause for Raya.
I'm afraid there is something I must tell you. I was an unwanted child, born not of grace, but of a hideous ritual, something that can never be accepted, not by men, nor serpents. Even Lady Tanith shouldn't accept me. I know that you have done so much for me, but I wish to ask one last kindness. Kill me, please. I thought that I feared nothing. But this, free me from this accursed frame.
Yeah, it hurts her so much that she no longer wants to live, at least initially. And now you can see why a tonic of forgetfulness isn't such a bad idea. Now, no doubt the worst outcome to this quest is to immediately do as Raya asks. She'll be grateful in her final moments, and her last thought, Mother, will be of Tanith, presumably. There is potentially an argument to do this as well. Plenty across the Lands Between would look favourably upon the death of another blasphemous man-serpent, but But I think the entire point of this quest stems around the idea that how we're born doesn't define us. Though, even bearing that in mind, through Raya's work in scouting new recruits to Volcano Manor, there's no question that she'll have contributed to an uptick in tarnished deaths. Then again, if you've got this far in the quests, you'll also have completed some of those contracts yourself, so that'd just be plain hypocritical. So let's look instead at what happens if we make Raya forget. Again, ignorance is kind of bliss here, and after falling into a slumber for a time, Raya will awaken having forgotten all the events from when she learned the dark side of Volcano Manor. And after Rykard is defeated and all the other NPCs leave this place, she'll return to the main quarters, confused but upbeat, now simply awaiting the return of whom she still believes to be her biological mother, Tanith, whom we may or may not have dealt with whilst she devoured Rykard's corpse. Oops. Eventually, Raya will head off to parts unknown, presumably in search of Tanith, who she won't find, though it's probably a better outcome than dying in utter despair. Her hope now may be a false one, but it is still a hope, and that's a fleeting thing in the lands between. Though the alternative favourable outcome to this then is to do nothing. Neither kill Naya nor give her the potion. Just leave her to sort things out on her own. Returning to her the first time after defeating Rykard, she'll still just be here, and will actually praise how kind and uncompromising we are in refusing to kill her. And this perhaps will stir something new in Raya. For when we return next, she's gone, leaving behind Dedekar's woe as always, but also a letter reading, quotes, "I wish to set out on a journey, so that one day I can carry on Mother's work, be the proud daughter of Tanith of Volcano Manor. Farewell, you've always been so kind, so uncompromising, my champion." End quote. So in this timeline, much like the former, Raya sets out into parts unknown of the world. Only this time she knows her dark truth, but rather than running from it, she instead turns her attention to one who's always cared for her entire life. And though now she knows that Tanith isn't or wasn't her birth mother, Raya's resolve to honour what her mother set out to do has never been stronger. It seems very uplifting, and it kind of is. Raya's gone through a lot of character development here, and no doubt comes out stronger than she ever otherwise would have been. The question is though, just what exactly she means by continuing her mother's work. Tanith did, after all, intend to continue the work of the Great Serpent, as we saw, and Raya in this timeline may very well become an additional threat at some point in the future. So perhaps it really is better to leave her a witless wanderer after all, or even just end her suffering at the depths of her despair. A difficult, multifaceted decision to make, at any rate. The loathsome Dung Eater is arguably one of the most abhorrent NPCs in the entire history of the Lands Between, responsible for killing and defiling thousands before nourishing their bodies with the Seedbed Curse, preventing their soul from ever returning to the Erd Tree, a practice that he referred to as the Reviled Blessing. And whilst he may appear as an omen in his armour, utterly covered in their horns, this is really just an armour set, with the Dung Eater himself just being a regular tarnished man. And the murder and defilement that he practiced was so horrific, so terrifying, that eventually the Dung Eater was captured and hanged, only to later be revived by grace, which necessitated his eternal imprisonment, alongside the actual omen, funnily enough, in the depths below the Lanedale royal capital. Now, as horrific as the perpetual murder and defilement of corpses sounds though, let's just take a step back for a second to take a look at what exactly the Dung Eater is trying to achieve by this. See, by most in the Lands Between, the Erd Tree is seen as a great beacon of hope, life, and order. Golden order, if you will. The root from which we as a Tarnished derive our power, as well as the guidance of grace, which is crucial to our journey. But the Dung Eater doesn't at all see it that way. To him, the Erd Tree and the Golden Order are things that ought to be opposed, an approach which we, to be fair, do kind of take in all but the main conventional ending to the game. Though the Dung Eater's methods to doing this are very different. See, he believes that if everybody, every living being anyone were to be defiled by his seedbed curse, then there'd be nobody left in the world to look down on these cursed beings as anything lesser. And the likes of the Omen would no longer be abhorrent, malformed products of the Crucible, they'd just be normal. Everyone would be normal. And nobody would be beholden to the Erd Tree or the Greater Will any longer. Honestly, it's not a terrible solution when looked at like this, and it's sort of like the opposite of that Incredibles quote, when everyone's cursed, no one will be. The choices we have in regards to this questline then are whether to help the Dung Eater enact his vision, or perhaps to steal away his free will permanently, making him a powerful puppet aid simply to us. So let's look at the hows, whys, and pros and cons of both options. To get to the point where we can make the choice though, we first need to find one of the Dung Eater's seedbed curses, the earliest of which can be obtained from the dungeons of Volcano Manor. After this, the Dung Eater projection in the Round Table Hold recognizing his curse will give us the key to release his body from the jail below Lanedell, and once free, he'll immediately go after Blackguard Big Boggarts, the Tarnished whom we encountered earlier for Raya's questline. And I think this guy's horror for what the Dung Eater does really hammers home that the seedbed curse is really not a pleasant thing for anyone to experience.
I was in the same jail as him once, so I know firsthand. He's a god-forsaken monster. Not just some petty thug like me. He's a killer. Kills people. And curses the souls. Does all sorts of shit to the corpses. To keep them cursed forever. I ain't seen nothing more disgusting in all my years. I never been more scared neither. Rooted to the bloody spot while he did that. To my friend.
So this guy's witnessed the Dung Eater's handiwork firsthand, and clearly shows no possible positivity towards it. And unfortunately, since we've then released the Dung Eater, it dooms him to suffer the same fate.
Help me out. Would you, mate? I don't want to get cursed. Just let me die. I don't want to live like this. Not anymore. So, please.
Yeah, again, this doesn't at all sell the idea of being cursed as good. Blackguard alone is clearly in agony and simply would prefer to just die. So imagine that happening to everyone in the Lands Between. In fact, the Dung Eater immediately attempts the same thing on us, and for the first time, seemingly ever, is resisted. And that's when he realizes the Dung Eater's job is not to single-handedly go around and administer his curse one by one to everybody. There is a significantly more efficient way of doing this with the seedbed curses he's already created, and it'll only require one more sacrifice: himself.
Defile my flesh with the seedbed curse, again and again, until it is done, until a cursed ring coalesces that may one day defile order itself. Countless I have killed, and countless I have defiled. And soon the fruits will be born. Hundreds will be reborn cursed. And they'll bear thousands of cursed children, who bear tens of thousands more. A few of those will be born just like me. And they'll kill and defile and bless in my stead. The rotten fools. My fate was the grandest, most brilliant of them all.
So we can do just this: obtain the remaining seedbed curses from around the Lands Between, use them to defile the Dung Eater multiple times, and once his agonized screams subside, the Mending Rune of the Fell Curse shall form. A loathsome rune gestated by the Dung Eater, and when used to restore the fractured Elden Ring, the reviled curse will last eternally, and the world's children, grandchildren, and every generation hence will be its pustules. If order is defiled entirely, defilement is defilement no more. And for every curse, a cursed blessing. That is the Dung Eater's vision put into action, and indeed, out of all of the game endings, it is, to be fair, seemingly the only one that completely says screw you to all gods. This one guy goes and makes every single being so cursed, so undesired by the likes of the Erd Tree and the Greater Will, that everyone is seemingly just left to do their own thing. But again, there's no escaping the question of whether defilement itself is actually the better outcome for the people of the lands between. After all, everyone who experienced this curse died in agony, and the Dung Eater is described multiple times as one of the most abhorrent, loathsome people to have ever lived. And there's nothing to say that Rani's 1,000-year voyage, for instance, where the land between is also seemingly left alone by gods, isn't just better. Independence without the need for a curse. But a complete ranking of which ending to the game is actually best is definitely a big enough topic for a whole nother video. So let's instead look at the alternative outcome for the Dung Eater. If you watched my worst decisions video for this game, you'll know all about the quest involving Seljavis and Nefeli Lu, where Seljavis gives us a potion with the intention to bind Nefeli's body and turn her into a puppet. However, if we refrain from doing this and just hold onto the potion for a while, we can eventually give it to the Dung Eater instead. Anytime after he requests more seedbed curses, and after Blackguard has sadly already died.
No. I am the Dung Eater. I am.
And for one short moment, he'll be vaguely aware of what's happening before falling into a deep, fathomless slumber, knowing at last that his destiny would forever be unfulfilled. And now, Dung Eater's puppet corpse will appear in Seljavis' secret lair, just across the bedchamber, in fact, from Sellen, disturbingly. Seljavis will assume, since the potion is gone, that we gave it to Nefeli, and after progressing a little more with his quest, we can buy the Dung Eater puppet summon in exchange for 5 starlight shards, and those are generally found along cliff edges in those half-bowl things. The Dung Eater is definitely one of the most powerful summons in the game, with the ability to use the Shriek of Milos, and you may very well find him to be more useful in this form than as a quest NPC. Plus, you're preventing a future that's equally horrible for everyone from ever coming to pass. Though you do completely end his quest in its tracks, immediately sever one entire ending, and lose out from getting his armor set at the end of the quest. Though to be fair, there is a way to actually get the armor and the summon, provided you kill him immediately after administering the potion. He won't show up in Seljavis' lair this way, but the puppet summon will still be available to purchase. So this is probably, definitely, the best choice in terms of items, but only, again, if you're happy to fully lock out the option of the Blessing of Despair ending, which is debatably horrible, or perhaps secretly brilliant. Sorceress Sellen, also known as the Graven Witch, is a character whose questline delves deep into the study of glintstone sorcery, the primeval currents, and the very nature of the stars themselves. You see, Sellen was once a great member of the Raya Lucaria Academy, one of the most pioneering and promising glintstone sorceresses that sought to probe ever deeper into her studies, unlocking the secrets of the primeval currents, a place somewhere far beyond the lands between, from which the stars themselves appear to originate. Stars in Elden Ring, you see, are not at all what we know them to be in real life, and are instead more akin to living cosmic entities. Entities like Estelle, natural born of the Void, who exists beneath the eternal city of Nokron, a terrifying, almost Lovecraftian-looking creature who doesn't necessarily represent the appearance of all stars, but rather is the embodiment of a malformed one. Though do bear Estelle in mind as we delve further into this, as it represents a glimpse into the horrors that lie within the primeval currents, something that Sellen and other sorcerers of the Academy once sought to probe ever deeper into. And this was namely 2 more of the founding masters, Azur and Lusat. We'll return to them in a bit, but first let's look at when the Tarnished first meet Sellen. Now, having long been an outcast from the Academy, and seemingly hiding out in Limgrave in a dungeon guarded by a pumpkinhead. And it's here that we can voluntarily take on the role of her apprentice.
A yen for glintstone sorceries. Well, your aptitude does appear passable, but one must choose one's masters wisely.
I was exiled from the Academy of Rea Lucaria as a reviled, apostate witch. Do you still wish to learn from me?
Persisting with yes, Sellen will now sell some glintstone sorceries, and that'll be all for a while. But Sellen will become relevant again sometime later after passing through Caria Manor and beginning Rani's questline. Here we'll be introduced to Preceptor Salivus, and he'll reveal that he actually helped Sellen after she was expelled from the academy, though it did come at a disturbing cost, as we'll learn shortly. Returning to Sellen after this, she'll then direct us to defeating General Radahn, which will allow the stars to resume their motions, and open up the huge hole in the ground leading to Nokron, in addition to now dispossessing Sellen of her own immortality. Whilst when the stars were still halted, Sellen's fate remained in stasis, but now she is free to both live and die. This brings us on to the next part of her quest. As I mentioned earlier, Sellen wasn't the only one to be banished from the Rea Lucaria Academy. Master Azure was once the foremost expert in the study of comets, and long ago began the very first specialist school of study, or conspectus as they'd all come to be known, called the Carolus Conspectus. Then, following in his footsteps, was Master Lusat, another founding sorcerer, this time hailing from the town of Celia, and his Olivinus Conspectus, which instead studied meteor sorceries. But both of these masters, just like Sellen, shared an unwavering fascination with delving even further into the mysteries of the primeval currents. Eventually, their continued pursuits of knowledge both proved fruitful in similar yet different ways. Master Azure, for one, saw darkness and was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss, whilst Master Lusat instead beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. The two were both banished for their actions in doing this though, and we'll get to why, but after being cast out, they both slowly turned into either blue or blue-green glintstone, achieving a near inorganic state, with even their brains eventually being entirely replaced with glintstone crowns. We'll first find Master Azure outside the hermit village on Mount Gelmir, and whilst completely immobile, he will still horrifically be alive, granting us a sorcery. On reporting this to Sellen, and upon her realizing that her former teacher trusted us, she'll open up to the Tarnished a whole lot more on her own agenda.
If you recall, I was exiled from the Academy of Rea Lucaria. It was for attempting to restore the primeval current of glintstone sorcery. The toothless pedantry peddled by the Carian royal family can rot for all I care. I want glintstone sorceries that open our minds, unbound by terrestrial taboos, no matter what we give in return.
It's interesting for her to talk about opening minds after we encountered Master Azure in a seemingly vegetative state, at least physically, and it sounds as though whatever his mind perceived of the wider cosmos, it was too much for his mortal body to handle. But Sellen seems to believe that Master Azure's body, exposed to the primeval current as it was, will be the key to restoring it. Him and Master Lusat too, whom Sellen will now direct us to find in a similar state, locked away in a cave not far above Celia. His head has instead turned into a blue crystal ball looking thing, and I can't help but note its similarity to the sort of giant eye in the head of Estelle. With both of the bodies now found and ready to be returned to the academy, it's now just a case of dealing with Sellen's problem. You see, this form of hers we've been conversing with is merely a projection, whilst her true body has the entire time been imprisoned below the Weeping Peninsula, presumably kept out of trouble whilst the stars were halted and she was still immortal. But as a glintstone sorceress herself, the essence of her life, her soul, if you will, is actually contained simply within one piece of primal glintstone, which, when retrieved from her shackled body, merely needs transplanting to another vessel to restore her to full life. And luckily for Sellen, we retrieve this just in time, as returning a short while later, we'll meet someone else who'd come to kill her. Jerren, whom we'll already have met at the Radahn festival. Jerren, you see, was once a friend of the Carian royal family, and as a long-standing favour to them, he vowed to one day kill this troublesome witch on their behalf. And with Sellen's mortality now restored, he's immediately come to do just that. Though the question remains as to exactly why.
She was known as the Graven Witch. Obsessed by the primeval current, countless sorcerers fell to her hand. The most dangerous mage in the entire history of Rhea Lucaria's academy.
So, Jerren claims that Sellen is responsible for the deaths of many other mages, and indeed, this would align with Sellen's own statements, that she wants to study more sorceries unbound by terrestrial taboos. We'll come back to this shortly, but first, no matter what, we'll need to find Sellen another body in order to progress this quest. And I suppose, fortunately, in this case, she actually has one. Remember that Seleuvis helped her after she was exiled from the academy? Well, in return, it seems he somehow procured a puppet form of her body. In a secret underground chamber not far from his tower, we can find Seleuvis' incredibly disturbing collection of people that he's turned into puppets. And Sellen's body is the most disturbing of them all, given her placements within his bedchamber. But never mind that for now, because it does conveniently serve effectively as a backup. And who's to say that this wasn't the plan she made with Seleuvis all along? And now, with the bodies of Sellen, Lusat, and Azir all in order, we can finally return to Rhea Lucaria and aid Sellen in restoring the primeval currents to glintstone sorceries. That is, after defeating Jerren, who, still hot on the heels of the now restored Sellen, tracks her all the way to Rhea Lucaria. Or, outside of Renala's chamber, we can actually instead make the choice to take Jerren's side, defeating Sellen after realizing the full scope of what she plans to do, and protecting the lands between from her morally corrupt practices. But before making this choice, there's one more thing that we need to be aware of, and that is the manner and reasons for which Sellen slaughtered other mages. No doubt, you'll have encountered these giant balls of sorcerer heads called graven masses, and these originate from a desire by certain glintstone sorcerers to tap into the primeval currents, to compound the bodies of their fellow mages and fashion them into the seeds of stars. The very first example of this can be found in the Albanoric Rise Tower, up in the consecrated snowfield region. A dead, and seemingly therefore failed attempt, though one that set in motion a nightmare that would continue to haunt the academy. For once opened as a path of scientific inquiry, there would always be those intrigued enough, and I suppose immoral enough, to pursue it. And we can find another atop the church in Rhea Lucaria itself, presumably this time made by Azir, given his glintstone staff is still here, and by the cluster of stars surrounding this one, it's clear that despite the horror of this thing, the practice was getting somewhere. Alas, the banishments of the offending mages presumably took place shortly after this, with Sellen at least remaining ever eager to one day continue the practice. So the big choice. We can remain on side with Sellen, now knowing she'll likely go on to transform more of her fellow mages into graven masses in pursuit of eldritch understanding, or we can side with Jerren, who definitely appears much more as the embodiment of classical moral good at this point. Though by this time in the game, both are established friends, and deciding is understandably tough. So let's look first at the rewards each will yield. If we side with Jerren, then the only unique reward we'll actually get is an ancient dragon smithing stone. A fine thing, no doubt about that, but there's a good handful of these in the world already. And so long as you don't want to max upgrade over 20 different weapons in one playthrough, you probably don't need this extra one. Though, siding with Sellen, on the other hand, will net Jerren's eccentric armor set, the glintstone crease weapon from Sellen, and an additional sorcery we can buy from her, the Shard Spiral. Additionally, with the bodies of Masters Lusat and Azir being moved in this timeline, returning to their original locations will net us a couple of very cool crystal armor sets. So pretty one-sided with rewards, to be fair. Siding with Sellen is definitely the better choice on that front, but after all of Jerren's help at the Redan festival, you do gotta feel somewhat bad about killing him for the sake of an, well, evil witch. And in fact, with the benefit of hindsight, I think it would have actually been a better fate for Sellen herself had we just ended her life permanently there and then. You see, after our brief final chat with her in the center of the library, the place Renala usually sits, Sellen pledges the Academy's aid to us for when we become Elden Lords. Renala is just sat behind a bookshelf at this point, still cradling Radagon's egg, and seemingly oblivious to all that's going on. Not that that really matters, because after resting just one time, Renala is back in her usual spots, and off to the side is what's left of Sellen, who in her pursuit of the primeval currents has become something I really didn't expect her to turn herself into. We can actually see her head inside this graven mass, and she'll seemingly still be fully aware, just about able to articulate the knowledge that we're her apprentice. A fate, no doubt, worse than death. And I can only assume that with the bodies of Azure and Lusat, Sellen believed that the graven mass experiment could finally yield total success, and was so assured in this fact that she opted to place herself into it. Or maybe she was involuntarily absorbed, it's not entirely clear. Either way, it honestly seems better for both Seren and Jerren to kill the witch before she can make this horrific mistake. But in terms of rewards for the Tarnished, it seems everyone else must suffer to our benefits. But let me know in the comments, which of these outcomes do you think is best, and why? Our final tough choice to make relates to the NPC Corhyn and the journey he takes to follow Goldmask, another questline that can result in another ending, the Age of Order. Initially though, we'll meet Corhyn at the Round Table Hold, and it's clear from the get-go that the guy is a devout follower of the Golden Order, never questioning its wisdom or grace, and offering to teach incantations to any Tarnished that pass through here, in the hope that one day he'll encounter they who will become Elden Lords, and through the pre-established correspondence, counsel them thereafter. The only time that his devoutness to the Golden Order seems to bend, in fact, is if we present him with a prayer book of incantations that doesn't originate from the Golden Order, like the Assassin's Prayer Book, for instance.
That is a work of heresy. Its incantations bear no lineage from the Erd Tree. Very well. I'll take it off your hands.
Perhaps he justifies this by the fact that he now has these incantations, not somebody else with less devout intentions, but then he is all too willing to teach us said incantations, so that brings his devoutness into question just a tiny little bit. Regardless, Corhyn will eventually depart the hold and make for the Altar's Plateau, in the hopes of seeking out Goldmask, another devout Tarnished scholar whose observations and contemplations over the Golden Order are more insightful, more discerning than probably anyone else's, even if he does only communicate through vague arm gestures. And after helping Corhyn to locate him, the man will act almost as a mediator, deciphering Goldmask's discoveries so that every time we run into them, he can relay these findings to us.
The Golden Order has bestowed me, talentless as I am, the great duty of documentarian.
And clearly, the guy has some self-esteem issues. And this continues until the pair reach the other side of Lane Dell, where Goldmask, utterly stumped on a nonsensical yet irrefutable fact, just sort of stops, like a broken machine whose logic circuits can't compute.
Now the Master is facing quite the puzzle. The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, the name of Marika's second husband, King Consort Radagon, also appeared. Who exactly was Radagon? The Master is stumped. His finger has remained still ever since Radagon's name was discovered. Curse my mediocre mind. The Master only has me. And here I fail him.
Again, the self-loathing, belittling himself remains a defining aspect of Corhyn's character. We can, of course, by casting the Law of Regression incantation on a nearby statue, deduce the only sense-making conclusion. Radagon is Marika, two pieces of the same being. We then report this to Goldmask, and his quest can continue, with Corhyn ever serving as his loyal documentarian. That is, until we find them again at the mountaintops of the Giants, where, now armed with the knowledge we have given him, Goldmask's observations of the Order begin to betray its flaws.
The rhythms and calculus of the Master's finger betray a suspicion of the holism of the Golden Order, a conceit, I am afraid, that cannot be overlooked. Oh, but how could this be? I dread to even entertain the possibility, but somehow I cannot cast aside my doubts about the Master. Tell me, have I simply lost my head? Only, if the Master were true to the Golden Order, why would he think to breach this forbidden mount of fire?
Corhyn, despite his self-proclaimed talentlessness, has managed to deduce that Goldmask no longer sees the Order as a complete paragon of grace and virtue. The irony being that Corhyn himself outright refuses to accept this truth. He believed, of course, in the wisdom of Goldmask, but only so far as it reinforced his pre-existing worldview. And when that is instead called into question, Corhyn just can't handle it.
Oh, Master, put my mind at ease. Dispel these fearsome thoughts. I want to place my trust in you, to be your scribe.
Now, here is where we have a choice to do something questionable, but potentially kind, for the now very heavily conflicted Corhyn. If you still have the tonic of forgetfulness left over from Raya's questline earlier, then you can now give it to Corhyn. He will forget Goldmask's transgressions against the Erdtree, though he'll also forget when Goldmask moves on from this place. Then, left alone and confused, seemingly oblivious at this point in the game to the burning Erdtree in front of him.
Master? Where did you go? I'm right here. Please, show me. Your finger, your rhythms and calculus. Let me document the motions. Master? Master, where did you go?
And then, upon returning again, it appears Corhyn will have perished, or at least that's what's implied by the description of his bell-bearing, whilst his robes explain his unwavering loyalty to the Golden Order as it was, saying that true guidance awaits those with iron wills, those with unwavering faith. Now perhaps that idea is a great comfort to him, to believe the Golden Order is so absolute in its brilliance that Corhyn can depend on it always and entirely, and he gets to die here with that notion upheld. Goldmask, on the other hand, has realized that the fickleness of gods was in actual fact no better than that of men, and will take it upon himself to create the mending rune of perfect order, allowing the Order to become what it was always meant to be. And indeed, if we choose this ending over the basic Age of Fracture one, it does at least serve to shake up the status quo, rather than just perpetuating the same cycle. But if we hadn't given Corhyn the tonic of forgetfulness, he'd have continued to follow Goldmask, and even at the very last, his unwavering loyalty to the Golden Order as is would not have been broken.
Oh, it's you. I finally come to understand. The Master was nothing more than a madman, enchanted by a vain and ruinous delusion. He rejected the perfection of the Golden Order, seeking to supplant our glorious faith with his own. Could there be a more pitiable comedy? Look at it. The culmination of perfection, burning before our very eyes.
Again, the real, most pitiable comedy here is the fact that whilst Corhyn could hear what Goldmask was saying, he refused entirely to listen. Refused to see the true and genuine flaws of the Golden Order, and despite his own admission of being talentless and mediocre, he assumes that Goldmask, whom he so revered, could not possibly be correct about the Order being flawed. And regardless of which fate we choose for Corhyn here, he will never budge from his unwavering devoutness, literally dying on this hill of ignorance or madness or both. So the question here really is whether to let him die oblivious to all of this and simply confused, or to allow him to continue to remember all the evidence Goldmask has presented for the Golden Order's flaws, and watch dumbfounded as he simply refuses to acknowledge or accept any of it. The guy is clearly shown to be a religious fanatic by the end of the game, and the choice poses a really interesting moral dilemma once you delve into the details of it. So let me know in the comments just which choice you think is best here. Again, do go check out Mandragora if you're itching for a new Souls-like fix, that's linked down below. And as always, a massive thank you to the patrons for supporting the channel and more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and have a great day.